Hey, it's Adam from Tested in my cave with another one-day build. What I've been noticing is that each time I post some of the more repeatable craft projects that I do here in the cave, like the fire lantern and specifically the poker table, that they've been going wildfire. You guys really like those videos. And I've in the past, I've like made the joke that Tested is not a how-to channel, it's more a what happened channel. So you get to watch me screw up in real time and talk about it. And we are still that kind of channel, but I also, watching the responses to these build videos that people are building their own versions of, I realize I have something to contribute there too. One of the things I build a lot in this shop is boxes. You know that whenever I find an object I love, I make a box to celebrate that thing. In fact, a box for my Blade Runner blaster is the very first of all the one-day builds. So today, I'm gonna build a simple box for this beautiful pair of Apollo gloves made by Ryan Nagata. And I'm gonna just walk you through the rudiments of how I make a simple, sturdy, lovely box. All right. Now, I like building boxes so much, I often go online and buy box hardware parts just to make sure I've got what I need when the time comes. And so many box builds for me begin with an examination of what I've got in front of me. So I'm about to build a box for these NASA gloves, which means I can throw out all these flowery corners and stuff like that. I think much more something along the lines of these corners might work for such a thing. So I'm gonna pull out 8 of those. I'm gonna need a handle on top of the box. This is a pretty straightforward hardware store handle, but I don't love it. I think I might go with one of these, which I had a while back and I'm still saving. I'm gonna need some kind of closure for the box. And on that front, I have options as well. These guys here. These guys might be perfect. So I've got 1, 2, all right, I have some ideas about the shape of this box, so let me do 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. Yeah, so this is sort of the preliminary shopping. I might not end up using all these parts, but I might. We will see. Let's see what else I've got here. I've got these guys, which are a little more substantial, but would NASA be using these? I don't think so. Those, wait. Let's take a look at these guys. Oh, these are prettier. These are much nicer. Yeah, these feel more like a kind of a piece of NASA hardware to me. Oh, I have 2 sizes. Look at this, how well prepared I am. Okay, 1, 2, 3, 4. I'm gonna use the small sizes. 1, 2, 3, 4. Yep, okay, I see now. I've got 2 large with locks on them and 4 small. 1, 2, 3. So let's do that. I've got 2 large in front and 2 small in the back, because I like those better than these. Now the question is, how big should this box be? When I am drawing out how big a box should be, I have learned the hard way to draw its interior. I can't tell you how many times I've measured a thing that I'm gonna build a box for, and then I build a box to the measurements of that, and what I've done is made a 1/2-inch thick wooden box that's too small on the inside to hold the thing I want. Yeah, I've made that mistake. So I think this one is pretty straightforward. I think its footprint is probably 14 inches, yeah. Let's say 14 by 8 by 14, okay. And then how high the interior, 12. Is it gonna be wider than it is tall? Is this gonna be 14? Yeah, it's gotta be 14. Well, it could be 13. Actually, 13's better. And 13 tall. Actually, I'm gonna go 15 tall. I have the rudiments of my box, the shape worked out. let's cut some plywood. That's some nice 1/4 inch ply. I like that. Yeah, I think I could do, let's see, I've got a bunch of these smaller cuts of 1/4 inch ply, so it'd be great to use those. This is really nice stuff. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. This is 6 ply, beautiful finished 1/4 inch. It's really robust, cuts well. Oh, it's just glorious to work with. Yeah, look at that. I've got 4 beautiful pieces. Actually, that might be the end of my good 1/4 inch ply. All right, so I got to make a note to get some more. Wait a second, what is this stuff here? Oh, okay. This is some nice 1/8 inch 3 ply birch. Okay, I can use that for part of this. I'm not going to use any of this Luan. Here's a sampling of the different kinds of plywood I have. Like, this is some regular 3 ply, kind of moderately, it's not quite crap, but it's not excellent. I have beautiful 6 ply. That stuff I love. I've got some super 3 ply. I think this is called Luan. So this is like a central layer covered by 2 veneers. It's fine for sets, theater sets. It's actually what most theater sets are built out of. I mean, it's just a super common material, not very good structurally. And when it starts to go, oh, it goes. So I think this is enough here. Now, I know I said that I was measuring the inside, but I see that I have enough slop, so I'm gonna build the box to these actual dimensions, 8 inches by 13 inches by 15 inches. In fact, just the one dimension that I'm a little nervous about is the 8 inch, so I'm gonna do it 8.5 by 13 by 15. There are 6 sides to this box. These are 3 of them. And these are indicative of the other 3, since the box is symmetrical. This 1, 2, and 3, side 1 and 2 and 3, have mates on their opposite sides that they are equivalent to. So I need to come up with 3 sets of measurement for these pieces. Because it's not just that all of the pieces are, it's not that piece 1 is simply 13 by 15 and piece 2 is 8 by 15. If I want these to be my dimensions, then I need to actually accommodate for the thickness of the material. So now I make a cut list. And the first decision to make with the cut list is, one of these pieces is going to be a full piece and the others will be bolted to it. So what's the full piece? Look, there are plenty of other ways of making boxes. You can do 45-degree cuts and everything is cut to those extents. I tend not to go for that level of precision here in the shop because I'm usually covering and or painting the boxes. So I'm just going with a, edge gluing with some nails. You'll see this later, but here comes the cut list. I think piece 1 here is going to be the full piece. So I need 2 pieces cut at 13 inches by 15 inches. Then this piece is going to be 15 tall. So I need 2 pieces at, now I said I wanted the ultimate dimensions to be 8.5. Since I'm using 1/4 inch material, this piece is actually going to be 8 inches by 15 inches. So that leaves the cut sizes for piece number 3 and its mate on the bottom. Now I have to accommodate for the thickness of material, which means I need to remove 1/4 inch and 2/4 inches. So instead of, well, let's just say that the actual box dimensions is 8.5 inches. Since I'm using 1/4 inch material, I remove a 1/4 inch and a 1/4 inch. That removes a 1/2 inch, which means the first dimension for piece 3, so 1, 2, 3. The first dimension for piece 3 is 8 inches. Now, on this side, 13, it'd be 13 minus a 1/2, so it would be 12 1/2 inches. There we go, that's my cut list. 2 at 13 by 15, 2 at 8 by 15, 2 at 8 by 12.5. I'll tell you one more secret. Actually, let me just double check. It's really important when you're doing cut lists like this, not to trust what the stated thickness of the plywood is. You gotta measure it. Just know that the dimensions of wood are not the dimensions that the wood is called. Go measure a 2x4. Oh, wait. Yeah, it's not 2x4 inches, is it? Don't get me wrong, I've seen a 2x4 in the distant past. It's pretty cool. So this is, wow, that is actually only 10th thou under a 1/4 inch. I will consider that. That's only 10 thousandths of an inch under a 1/4 inch. It's 0.24 inches. It's literally the equivalent of 2.5 sheets of paper. So I'm just gonna go with the measurement of 1/4 inch, but measure first. "13 inches. Now, 8 by 15. Since I cut my long pieces at 15, this is still 15 wide here, and I know that this is more than 8. So I already have one cut done for these 2 pieces. I just need to set my fence to 8 inches. Now, let me tell you about using a table saw. The blade, super dangerous. And every time I use a table saw, I'm terrified of it. I'm expecting somebody to walk in here with a bucket full of grease and marbles and spill it at my feet, so I start to and fall on the table saw. I consider this a healthy amount of respect for the table saw. All right, so here we go. Last piece is 2 times 3, 8 by 12.5. 2 cuts at 8. Two cuts at 12.5. Is that going to work? That will. Now, on a table saw, in general, I probably should have done the 12.5 cut first, because you don't want to fit something into the table saw that's wider than it is long. It's certainly possible to make that cut. It's not great table saw practice, so I'm not going to do that. I'm going to pull out my fence, which I know will clear. And if I do that, then the fence holds onto the piece for me. I just have to raise it until the blade comes up. There we go. Okay, here comes my 12.5. Oh, that's not it. That's it. Every time I'm making a cut, I'm checking the corners of the piece that will be the final piece and making sure that they're okay. On this piece, I got this little nicky ding here. I don't want that to be part of my box, so I make sure it's on the end cut. Every time I put a piece in the table saw, I'm double checking to make sure it's going to be nice once it's done being cut. So there you have, yep, 6 pieces of wood, all cut to size. Now it's time to glue them. All right. I'm going to do my box assembly on the table saw specifically because it's a beautiful flat surface. But let me show you what I'm going to use to put this box together. I'm going to use some Tite Bond wood glue. I very much love this stuff, and in my opinion, wood glue might be the best of all glues. I'll explain. There are glues that are faster. There are glues that give me surfaces I like to work with better, but almost all glues are an exercise in some compromise and often disappointment. That is my personal experience. And for a glue to call itself wood glue, and then to glue wood so well that the glued part is the strongest part of the wood, That is absolutely delivering on the promise. It says wood glue, man, it glues wood like nobody's freaking business. It's basically a PVA, and there are many different brands of this. Everybody has their favorite. I like the Type-On right now, but I'm not super persnickety about the kind of wood glue I use. They all have worked for me. The second thing I'm going to use to put these together is this 22 gauge nailer. 22 gauge is the size of the wire that makes these staples, and holy hell, are they freaking tiny. It is so lovely. Look at how small those are. Look at how, okay, here, let me get one out. That is a 22 gauge nail. Wait till you see the mark that it leaves when you use it, which is to say, you won't. Okay, and the last thing is some acid brushes, because if you're going to be gluing wood to wood, it's not just enough to lay a bead of glue down and hope that it squeezes out. You want to cover it and make sure it's got 100% coverage on that joint. Just make your life a lot easier later on. Woodworking is one of those things that an ounce of planning in the beginning saves you a pound of headaches on the other end, repeatedly, repeatedly, repeatedly. In order to come up with my cutlass, I chose the full pieces that would be the unbroken sides first, and that's these two pieces. And they will be sandwiching two sides that go on the inside and two top and a bottom that go on the inside. So I'm going to assemble this ring of plywood first and then put this on the outside. I have found that to be just the best way of thinking through the problem. Great practice for woodworking is to soften the edges of your freshly cut plywood. It just makes for a cleaner project later on. And I have a kind of a fast shop hack for doing that. This, you might recognize, is my sword grinding linisher, AKA belt sander. And I have on it a bit of Scotch-Brite, 3M Scotch-Brite material. This is fabulous for doing finish polishing on metals. It also is spectacular for taking just a tiny bit off of wooden corners. Watch this. Take a look. It's just the tiniest bit, but honestly, since I started doing it, my woodworking has become a lot cleaner. Wait, one more thing. You should know that they make these Scotch-Brite belts for many, many different kinds of belt sanders. So if you have a belt sander in the shop, go looking to see if they make one for it, because I've also got one for these 24-inch, and they're on the back here somewhere. They're just spectacular finishing belts. In general, you don't want to necessarily use the longest nails for your project. I like these, which are just about 5/8 of an inch long, 4/4 inch ply. I find it's pretty versatile. So I'll load these in. There's usually an arrow on them, which shows, you can see the arrow, that shows the direction that they get stapled in. And just for testing, I'm just going to see if it's actually going through. Oh, yeah, there you go. And note, that's actually one of the dangers with a pin nailer like this, is it can actually travel all the way through the wood and across the shop. So in the same way that you don't point any gun at anything you don't want to destroy, you don't point a pin gun at anyone in the vicinity. It's bad practice. So you want to be super careful. And I'm actually going to talk about a couple more ways to be super careful with a pin nailer, because they can wreak a lot of havoc on your fingers and thus your work, the business end of your ability to work. Listen, there's a reason every YouTuber or carpenter does this and makes sure they have full coverage. It just makes much better work. So let's see here. I'm not worrying about how square it is right now because it doesn't need to be. I'll square it up later when I put the pieces on it. And so here goes. And we'll do a second one. And a third one. Turn it over. At the top. Now, I want to point out something that I'm doing here. When I'm about to put in this nail right here, I'm like holding the pieces in orientation, and then what you noticed me doing was just before I put in the nail, I raised all my fingers. This is because wood is a often fairly homogeneous material, but with all sorts of things going on inside. And anyone who uses a pin nailer can tell you that the pins can go in and come out at all sorts of weird angles. You want to keep your fingers clear, not just of one pin nail's width from the gun, actually more like 2 or 3 pin nail widths. I've had friends who fired a pin into a piece of wood, fired a second pin into the first pin, and drove the first pin out through the wood and out through their damn finger. Yeah, these things are really problematic from an injury standpoint. So I'm gonna keep on doing this and you'll watch. I set up, get my hands in position, and then before I pull the trigger, I bring everything up so there's no chance that the nail can get to my tender flesh. Now, look, I totally agree with you if you're a bit lazy, that that's probably plenty in terms of the glue coverage, but no, listen. Take the time. You'll be happier later. The things you build will last longer, I swear. It might not seem like a big change, but it's also a little bit of like the consciousness you have around it, that you're taking care with every single join. All right, so again, I do the top the same way I did before. Bring it up, clearing. Right, it's like I'm using the defibrillator. Clear! All right. I've got it set. I'm putting it in the second hole. Clear! Okay, and each time I'm doing this, I'm looking down on the pin nailer to make sure it's perfectly parallel and square to the work. That means I don't get any blow-throughs on the inside. This is a common problem with pin nails, is that sometimes they'll come up on the inside if you're not perfectly aligned. And frankly, when you're working with material thinner than a 1/4 inch, it becomes, you just have to be really, really on your game. Again, also, you want to inspect every face you're going to glue to make sure you've removed any debris. Even a little bit of sawdust can actually prevent stuff from sitting tight. So on something like this now, I've got a bunch of orientations going on. I'm going to just start and do sort of some cornering work. Do another one here. Again, removing all fingers before the pin goes in. Here comes the next one. Getting it all in place. Now I'm actually using the pin gun to kind of clamp for me here. Great. And then the last one. So often when I'm pinning something together, I'll put in the mission critical pins and then fill it in with the other ones later. So here we go. I know, not the same amount of pins on each side. That's just my laziness and sloppiness as a carpenter. So touch each, take a look. A visual inspection of the inside shows no blow-throughs, which is nice and actually, frankly, uncommon. I'm gonna test fit this side here, and it's lovely. It's lovely in the width. Again, this piece isn't fully square yet because it still has some movability, but that's fine. I don't need it to be. I'm gonna make it square with this puppy. One thing sometimes to keep an eye on, these acid brushes can tend to lose some of their bristles. Just keep an eye and make sure there aren't any. There's one in your way. So here we go. And again, I'm going to do this the same way I did those other ones, which is to do the corners first to make sure I'm super lined up with everything. Yeah, there we go. Now, I'm using really good plywood, so it's not wandering very much, but plywood can tend to wander. So for instance, This is flush here, but a little proud here. This is why the next set of pins you put in should be in the middle. Sometimes you can have plywood that's really wandering. Again, you can kind of creep on it and just sort of up, and stitch it into submission. This one looks great. This one seems just fine. There we go. Oh, okay, that one's a little bit proud. Good. Okay, so. So there you have it. That is one whole side done. And if I look on the inside, oh, I found a bristle of my acid brush, but no pins blowing through. Very happy. Let's do the last side. Just the same way I talked in a recent video about using my pinky to guide a pencil line, I'm actually using my pinky, the pad of my pinky to guide the glue line all the way down. Oh, here we go. And some glue will squish out. That's totally fine. That's all dealable later. Let's get you out of there. Now again, even here, it's racked just a little bit off of square, and that can happen, which is why you want to do the corners first. If I started stitching this up and I was a little bit off, I'm not going to learn that a corner's out of phase until I get to that corner. Don't assume you can stitch it right perfectly into the corner. There we go. Now I bet there's a question forming in your mind. What are you wondering? Well, if I was watching this video, I'd be saying, wait a minute, Adam, if you're making a box to hold your gloves, presumably one would need to get into that box. And I've just made a perfectly sealed thing. So how am I going to get my gloves in there? Well, this is one of my personal little secret things that I do here in the shop. When I'm going to make a box with a lid, I make the box first and then I cut it apart. That way, all the pieces that I've used match and marry to each other just perfectly. So now what I want to do is I want to figure out where I'm going to make the cut. And then I want to make sure I put a couple staples on either side of that cut to give it a little bit more mechanical support. Oh, I'm so sorry. Can we talk about this pin nailer for a second? Come on over here. Look at how tiny these holes are. Honestly, on some materials, you can't even see it. And once you give it a coat of paint, it's gone entirely. 22 gauge pins are fabulously invisible. Really, it changed my life. I didn't know that you could get pins that small just until a couple years ago, and it's seriously altered all of my carpentry. Before that, I was using a bigger pin gun, which is fine, and you can carefully set it, and all that's really great, but 22 gauge, man, it's the business. So, where do I want to cut this? Now, I had this idea about this box that I don't want it to be a lid. Like, I'm often making my boxes because I want to celebrate the object that's going in them, which means I want it to be a kind of a display. And so on that front then, I think what I'm going to do here is I'm going to cut it like here so that this part has a handle on it. And this lifts off. So you'd have, say, a closure here, and a closure on the other side, two closures on the other side, and you would undo those and pull off the top of this box. And then you've got the two gloves standing there being displayed for all the world like the beautiful pieces of art that they are. Yeah, so now the question is, where does that dividing line happen? So let's bring a glove over and take a look. Now the gloves are gonna sit in here like this. Oh, that's lovely. They're gonna sit about like that, about that high off. And I don't want a lot of material here. It's kind of like that, isn't it? Yeah, I think it's like that. So how far is that? Is, oh, let's say 2 inches. I like round numbers. Do you want to know why round numbers are really awesome to build with? When I machined the front couplers of the Apollo spacesuits, what I found was I had a wax casting of an original coupler to measure off of. And what I found was every measurement of that piece was a whole number. I mean, within the English, within the imperial measurement system, which is a dog's breakfast, to be sure. However, it's like, it was 1 3/4 inches in diameter, not 1.7217. It's like a round number, 1.75. And every time you were measuring the width of a gully or the distance between two things, it was a round number of degrees, and it was like 1/8 of an inch, 1/4 of an inch. And what that does is, it is a real tip of the hat to the people coming behind you. What you're saying is, I used all whole numbers, so you don't have to guess to the 10,000th decimal point of what measurement I was using when I made this part. You can see that it is exactly 2 inches, and thus all you need to do is measure exactly 2 inches, not 2.07321. Yeah, and that's a significant thing. So, like the NASA engineers of yore, and currently, I try and use all whole numbers when I do this. So I'm gonna go 2 inches from the, I look at that. Okay, now I look at that and I think, yeah, that's right. Could it be 2.5? Could it be 2.5? I think it could be 2.5. This just looks a little anemic as the second part of this box, and that feels just a little more substantial. So I don't need to measure it because we're going to make the cut using the table saw. I'm gonna set it at a width of 2.5 inches. I'm gonna set it just higher than the plywood. Yeah. And away we go. Now I'm pushing this against this. I have a lot of meat with which I can grab this. This is a tricky cut. You don't want to mess around with it, but honestly, I haven't gotten into trouble making this one before, so hopefully I won't here. Let's see. I'm gonna use that. There we go. Now, I chose the order of these cuts carefully. I wanted the widest, flattest, most stable surface for my last cut, because as soon as it releases the material in the other end, this piece becomes a potential projectile, and I don't want that. So I'm gonna be holding this tight, pushing down, also using this other hand to push against the fence and make sure everything is being really well held. Once I get through the blade, there we go. I don't have to worry about this piece, it's just sitting there. And there you have it. Ladies and gentlemen, a box and its lid. It's always good to just always go from the same sides when you build this. Like, you don't want to try and put the box together like this. It might not go back the way you think. Just don't ever count on everything being perfect and square and symmetrical. Now, the only other person I know who has a linisher with a Scotch-Brite pad on it is Peter Lyon. So Peter at Weta, if everyone starts coming to your shop to do their woodworking corner rounding, sorry about that. I've got my box and my lid, but how do I make sure that they connect to each other? Well, I could put some connectors on the other side to be certain, but I want a little bit of alignment. So I'm going to add a lip to the inside of this that holds the two boxes together. In fact, I think I'm going to put that lid The question is whether to put it on here or here. So that begs the question of what looks better. Like if that's like that, it looks kind of like a tray. It's kind of neat. All right, I'm going to have these on a little bit of a riser there. Yeah. Okay. So I think I'm going to put it in here. Okay. So in order to do that, I'm going to use some super short nails, and I'm going to use some thinner plywood. Yeah, this beautiful, this is actually made by Revell Model Company. It's their 1/8 inch by 12 by 24 inch birch ply. And like I said, it's lovely stuff. It has a little bit of a bend to it, which means you could do some relatively shallow curves. And when you start curving plywood, things get pretty magical. But that's another video. Two pieces that are exactly 12.5 by 1 inch. I want to do 1 inch wide. So I don't want to. Right, okay. I'm going to cut some 1 inch strip, and that will get me all the way around, and then I'll make the cuts on the 1 inch. So here we go. So the reason you don't want to cut things that are wider than they are long is imagine if you tried to cut this on the table saw. As you fed it in, and this blade is creating all of this energy attacking this piece of wood, pushing it down, it's also trying to cast it this way, which means as you're pulling, any bit of torsion like this, any bit of adjustment that happens is gonna get kicked into the blade, and this thing's gonna go all the way across. If you're in a wood shop right now, I'm sure you can point to the piece of plywood that shows how unhappy Mr. Table Saw can get when you don't feed him correctly. Yeah. Every shop has that piece of wood. So in order to cut these pieces down, I'm again gonna go to my fence. This is the point in my construction where I often stop using rulers to come up with my critical dimensions and just start using the real world. So now I'm just measuring this to this. There we go. So I'm gonna cut to that side of this line using my fence. Now I'm going to cut both pieces at once, which means I'm lining their ends up so they're super square. And then I'm holding them down on the fence and I'm bringing them over to the blade. And now I'm going to make incredibly sure that the edge of the blade cuts precisely to the line that I want. Yeah, if you look at this shot, you will see that I am right on the freaking money. Test fit. Oh, look at that. It actually wedges in. That's the ideal. That's like, when it wedges in, that's within like 2 thou. That's really nice. Okay, so now the second measurement I need is minus the thickness of these two pieces of wood. Because I'll have one on either side, I put them both at the bottom, and then I put this piece up to it, press it down, and make my measurement. If I have to take this down a little bit, it's easy enough to do on the belt sander. But I think that went really well. Love it. Now I cut these little pieces of paper for a really specific reason, and you're gonna kind of love it. And that is that I have found in the past that when I make a alignment border like this for joining two boxes to each other, that I often end up with a little bit of a fitment issue because it's all meant to fit together a little, come on, there we go. A little too closely, right? So this is my biggest issue as a builder, is I often build things to too high a tolerance and then my lids don't go back on again. And if I made this, I would be able to get it into here, but I'd have to sand the inside of this and sand the outside of this, as I've done many times. So now what I do is I'll frequently use a piece of heavy cardstock, and I'll cut a strip, and that strip will give me the extra little distance, and it's not much. Here we go. Let's see here. 22 thou. Yeah, it's not a hell of a lot. It's like half a matchstick, paper match, half the thickness of a paper match. But that gives me a little bit of the tolerance wiggle room that I seek because I've screwed it up so many times. All right, I forgot to mark it, so let me just give a little bit of a mark so I have something kind of compare to. Okay, now I add some more glue to do the top and the bottom. Listen, always just glue the whole surface. Seriously, this is one of the biggest lessons I've gotten from hundreds of hours of watching YouTube carpenters ply their beautiful trade. They just make sure they have 100% coverage between glue joints. And frankly, it's just made me a better carpenter to follow the same practice. Comme ça. And we'll adjust it in a second. Yeah, that goes down. Okay, good. And then this one goes in over here. Oh, love a press fit. Come on in. Oh, that's a little tight. I bet that's from the other side. Oh, that's it. Okay. Whoop, whoop, whoop. All my tolerances. Yep. Excellent. And the last one. Coming at you. Oh, that's why it's a little off, because I had the thickness of the paper. Whoop, I just screwed it up. Hold on. So I just shattered my glue joint there. I didn't shatter it, but I busted it because I hadn't accounted for the thickness of the paper. So let me get a little bit of, oh, now I can just get another, oh, look at that. I somehow, oh, maybe you were watching and you didn't see I didn't staple the whole second part in, but apparently I didn't. So let me get some nails in there. As far as these guys, I feel pretty good about that. That is, it's just a little bit to fix. I'm just gonna put a couple of nails in here. I'll have to cut them and sand them down, but they'll just mechanically hold this thing in place. And if you watch here, you'll see them come through. Nice thing about these is a simple flush cutter makes it go away. As always, you wear eye protection to keep the little flying pieces of wire from finding the soft flesh of your aqueous humor. I know there's no flesh in the aqueous humor. So there's one little fitment problem left, which is that while I use the paper to offset on the inside my lip here, that also necessitated the top of this actually coming in a little bit. So I need to do a tiny bit of chisel work here. Right there, that bit is proud. So I just want to kind of take it down just a little bit. And you can do this with a chisel, you can do it with a saw, you can do it with a, hell, you can do it with a sanding stick. Ooh, oh, screwed up. Okay, let's use a sanding stick, shall we? All right, we're gonna do a test fit here. That's my A side, this is my A side, and we bring these to each other. Oh. There we are. That's lovely. That's a nice positive fit without a ton of movement. 20 thou is a terrific amount of slop to give yourself in carpentry projects. That worked out really, really nicely. So, now the question is, let's see, what's next? I think I want to do big structural stuff before I do small detail stuff. So the next thing is the stand for the gloves. Now the stand for the gloves, I'm gonna hold them about like this. And I could like screw in some dowels to hold them up here, but well, if you read my book, you know I like mechanical connections rather than glue. So I'm not gonna glue them in, I'm just gonna make a platform that sits on the bottom of this that holds them, and then I can change it later if I so desire. So that piece that I will lay into the bottom of this is precisely 8 inches by 12.5. Now what I'm about to do is cut a piece of this semi-crappy ply, which I'll cover over and hide the crimes, that slips inside this and holds the gloves upright. And the critical dimensions here are 8 inches by 12.5, but I'm not gonna cut my piece of wood to that. I'm gonna cut it just a tiny bit under each of those measurements so that it slides in and I don't have to force it. So I'm just gonna go about something less than 1/16 of an inch, probably about 50 thou. No, that's not the cut I wanna make first. I wanna do the 12-inch cut first and the 8-inch cut second. So I'm gonna go to 12.5, I'm gonna go about 50 thousandths, just slightly less than 1/16 under. Now for the 8-inch cut, same thing. Coming under by just slightly less than one of the 16th-inch markers. And we'll see how I did. Oh, yeah. Look at that. Now you'd call that an exact freaking fit, but the fact is, it's under by about 50 thou, and that means that it can slide back out again. I like this dowel. This will be great. One there, one there. All right, I figured out how I want this to look, and I'm gonna do it out of 1-inch Delrin. Now I know this is a woodworking video, but I want to just say one thing about using Forstner bits on Delrin in your lathe. Your lathe isn't going to like it, and I don't mean that it's problematic. I just mean that it's a tremendous amount of force that gets put on it, and that means it's often going to push the work into your jaws. So when you're using a Forstner bit on Delrin on your lathe, or on anything, honestly, you want to make sure it's really clamped down well. Excellent. let's say about there. Yeah, it's true. The sled is fabulous for irregular shapes as well. It kind of negates the need for a chop saw here, and that's why you'll notice we don't have one. I mean, I have one. I think I own 3, but I don't need them permanently set up here. All right, wood screws. Good. Yeah, I didn't hear it go brrr either, but that's fine. It'll do fine for this build. All right, there we go. I've got the glove part done. Let's put this on the lid. That goes in there. And one glove goes here, one glove goes there. That's really nice. And this sits on top of that. Okay, we're good. I'm very happy with that. So let's put in some hardware. So now it's time to put on my hardware. And to do that, I'm gonna do a little bit of this business. Great. Now there's that. And then there's that. And nice. Very happy with that. Okay, great. Now on to the other side. Right, there we go. That is a box. Now, it's not quite done, but look at that, look at that. That is, sorry, I positioned it for me, not for you. There you go. So we go like that, and close it up. Now, this is the point in the build. There's still a lot left to do to turn this into the kind of vessel that I like storing my favorite things in. But this is the point at which, for me, creatively, I would sort of sit back and live with this for a while. I had the handle set out for this. I didn't like that handle. I want to find a different one. I'm probably going to end up painting this whole thing white. I don't know what the inside's going to look like. I might even cut a window. At this stage, with a box build, I usually don't have a clear path forward, and I just sort of live with it for a little while and see what I like. I may go print up some NASA stickers and think about putting them in different places. I may do some sketches of this box while I'm on a plane trip. But as far as a lovely vessel and a simple wooden box to hold a beautiful object in, I think it is an excellent object lesson. Thanks.